Thank you for coming. I appreciate you being here. My name is Matt Roloffs. I'm the chair of the Department of Economics here at Western Washington University. And on behalf of the Paul Storer Memorial Fund, our department, our co-sponsors from the Center for Canadian American Studies, the Border Policy Research Institute, the Marine and Coastal Science Program, and the Foundation for WW and alumni, I'd like to welcome you to the 2024 Paul Storer Memorial Lecture featuring Dr. Rashid Sumaila of the University of British Columbia. I'd like to begin today by reading our tribal land statement and acknowledge that we gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Lummi Nation and the Nooksap tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. A few organizational details before we get started today. We've allocated about an hour or so for the lecture, and Dr. Sumaila has graciously agreed to answer questions during a 30-minute Q&A following the lecture. For those of you here in the room, we have a microphone that we'll be bringing around so that we can all hear your question. If you're joining us via the Zoom webinar, you can submit your questions via the Q&A feature, and my colleague Jason Query is going to monitor and ask those questions for you. Finally, we did receive a few questions in advance, and we'll sprinkle those in throughout the discussion as well. Before I bring up Deanna Kennedy, Dean of our college, to introduce our speaker, I'd like to say a few words about the reason that we're here today. And that is to honor and celebrate the work and memory of our dear friend and colleague, Dr. Paul Storer. As time passes, I feel a stronger and stronger urgency to share who Paul was and what he meant to our department, college, and university. It's great to see many of Paul's WWU colleagues here today, and I'm glad that many of Paul's family and friends are able to join us via the webinar as well. It's good to have you all here. Dr. Paul Storer earned his BA and MA degrees in economics at the University of Toronto and a PhD in economics from the University of Western Ontario. After spending some time working at the Bank of Canada and teaching at the University of Quebec in Montreal, Paul and his family, his wife Tina, and their children Leah and Nick, moved to Bellingham in 1996. At Western, Paul quickly established himself as a respected teacher, scholar, and for many of us in the room, a leader and a mentor. Paul taught courses and conducted research in macroeconomics, money and banking, labor economics, Canadian economic policy, and the business and economic relationships between the US and Canada. Paul was a 5-time recipient of the CBE Dean's Research Award and was recognized in 2004 with the university's Excellence in Teaching Award. He served as the editor of the Northwest Journal of Business and Economics from 2001 to 2005 and was a valuable member of the board of the Pacific Northwest Regional Economic Conference, or PNREC. Finally, and with an approach and style that I've come to appreciate more and more over the past couple of years, he served as our department chair from 2007 to 2013. The department, the university, and the discipline were deeply changed for the better through Paul's dedication and efforts, and we miss him a great deal. The Paul Storer Memorial Fund was first established in Paul's honor in 2016. The purpose of the fund is twofold. First, to support and present an annual lecture on the state of Canada-US business and economic relations. And second, to support student attendance at PNREC. We distribute some flyers around the room, or we have flyers at the snack table, I guess, better put, that share more about Paul's legacy and the fund, including details for you to contribute if you would like. Now, to introduce our speaker today, I'd like to invite Dr. Deanna Kennedy, Dean of the College of Business and Economics here at Western, to the podium and hand off the clicky mic.
All right, thanks everyone. Can you hear me okay? Click this on real quick. All right, thanks. I have the honor and the privilege of introducing our speaker today. And I have a bio, and if I try to practice some of these words, so hopefully I get most of them right. So to introduce our speaker today, Rashid Sumaila is a professor and Canada Research Chair, Tier 1 in Interdisciplinary Ocean and Fisheries Economics at the Institute for the Oceans and Fisheries and the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs at the University of British Columbia. His research focuses on bioeconomics, marine ecosystem valuation, and the analysis of global issues such as fisheries, subsidies, marine protected areas, illegal fishing, climate change, marine plastic pollution, and oil spills. Sumaila has experience working in fisheries and natural resource projects in Norway, Canada, and the North Atlantic region, Namibia, and the Southern African region, Ghana and the West African region, and Hong Kong and the South China Sea. Dr. Sumaila received his PhD in economics from the University of Bergen, thank you, in Norway, and his Bachelor of Science in Quantity Surveying from the Ahmadu Bello University in Nigeria. Yeah. Just checking. Sumaila is widely published and cited. He won the 2023 Tyler Prize with Daniel Pauly, the 2017 Volvo Environment Prize, and was named a Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada in 2019 and the American Association for the Advancement of Science in 2023. Very impressive. His interest in the environment started early in life when his grandfather used to say, people should walk as if the ground feels pain. This is sophisticated environmentalism. His specific interest in ocean and fisheries was picked up during his time in Norway. Sumaila enjoys exploring novel ideas and mentoring future thinkers. He loves waking up each day thinking of how best to contribute to ensuring that we bequeath a healthy ocean to our children and grandchildren so they too can have the option to do the same. So we are honored to have Rashid with us today to present his lecture titled Managing Shared Fish Stocks Between Canada and the United States Under Climate Change. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rashid Sumaila. And a handoff. There you go.
To do it right. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're good to go.
Just go.
All right.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Clicker if you.
Is it working here?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Oh.
You cannot see here.
That's the last step.
The last step, yeah.
We
I
can hear
remember the
you.
step I messed up last time. There we go.
Yeah, so thank you
Great,
very
yeah.
much. Thanks to the Dean for the introduction. Thanks to Matt and his group for inviting me. This is an honor. It's always a pleasure to get the chance to share with people like you, right? And to learn. So that's the title of the talk. And I thought to complement what Matt said about Professor Paul, I thought I should show his picture as if you don't know him, right? But I didn't. So now this is the man we're doing this for to remember. And when I read a bit about him, I realized it's really a Canadian and American at the same time, a true North American who has tried really hard to bring the two countries together, to understand each other and work together in various ways. And that's something I admire very much, because if Canada and the US cannot work together, then the world is in trouble, you know? So we got to get it right. And so that's great. And he also cares about policy a lot, which is something I care about, as you will see. So that is also nice to see. Sadly, he left very early. I was shocked to see. Was it 55 years? You know, so that's a bit early from what I read. I don't know that is correct. You can correct me, but that's life sometimes, right? So rest in peace, Paul Sture. I actually call him Sture because it looks like a Norwegian name, actually. And Norwegian Sture is big, right? On a Sture is big, yeah. So that is that. Let me see, where do I go next? So this is what I planned for the 1 hour or so we have. for the presentation. A bit talk about my research and how I do my research. You know, I'm an economist, interdisciplinary oceans and fisheries economist. That's how I call myself. And I deliberately put the interdisciplinary just to show that I really work with colleagues from all disciplines to try to understand the ocean and try to do research that can help policy. So you will see that. Then I talk about the ocean and we the people, ocean and us. What is the connection and relationship? And then I move slowly into the main topic of the day, which is climate change and shared stocks management. And as part of that, I will talk mainly, I'll apply the idea of threat points in game theory. Threat points, which I will explain those of you who are not game theorists. And then I apply it to Canada and US managing their shared stocks of halibut, Pacific halibut, cod, and I think yellowtail flounder, I think you will see later. So I'll apply that. So that is the plan for you. So let's get going. So here it is. And I see myself as an economist who is acutely aware of the environment economy connection, of the ocean economy connection. So I'm not one of those who think we can create nature just like that, magically, right? Nature is there and we're connected to it. And this model, that's my favorite model. If you want to know my favorite model, that's it. So here you have the ocean environment in light blue, and you have us in the middle. The human beings, our economy, our social systems, our culture. And when you think about what we do when we go to the ocean, I think we can boil it down to just two things we do. First one is the things that we take from the ocean into our economy, into our social systems, our culture. The things we need, the things we want, the things we desire, the services we enjoy from the ocean. We take them, we use them, and at the end of the day, what do we produce? Produce waste, produce plastic, pump out CO2 and all that. And where do they go? They go back to the ocean, to the environment. So from the ocean, good things come. To the ocean, bad things go. And the whole of our work, ocean scientists of all types, is how to provide the evidence and knowledge, policy science to help society do the taking wisely, not to overtake, not to overdo, not to knock off the habitats once we take, and also to do the pumping out wisely, right? Not to overpollute plastic and debris and all that. So that defines what I try to do with economics as one of the disciplines has to integrate, because I had to understand the biology to a good extent, the ecology, in order to take it in. You have to even talk with green chemists, for example, how chemistry people, how do you see what I have here? How do you have one that doesn't really cause harm, right? And to do that properly, I think you got to do it in an interdisciplinary way, in a partnership way, in a co-creative way, working with people. And that is how I try to do my research. And I also enjoy working at the intersections of disciplines. And it's so surprising. The dean just told you that my first degree was actually building technology. I was supposed to be building this kind of fancy houses and bridges. I specialize in quantity surveying. And you know what? I started working and I quickly get bored with all the drawings. I say, you know, I want to do something which is more public facing. Right? That's how I moved to economics for my master's and PhD. And so I just love being in that space where you can shake up things a bit, right? You know, outside the box or in the box or whatever. And I try to show genuine understanding for the approaches and methods of disciplines other than mine, you know? Because I try to say, look, when I work with my ecologists, I listen to them seriously. When I talk with indigenous people, I listen to them. When they say, look, Rashid, our life is not only about profit, you know? There are other things to care about, not just profit. I say, okay, yeah, got to listen to that. How can I integrate that? So that is, and I'm aware that there are multiple ways of approaching a problem, you know, look at things differently. And you know what? I love divergent thinking. There's nothing I like in class like when a student challenges me. And we had a nice one. A lawyer came to my class, a law student joined my economics class, and I was telling him about property rights. I said, you know what? If you have property, people take good care of them, their things, so we have to have property rights in fisheries. And he's a lawyer. I said, are you sure about what you just said? I said, yeah, that's the received theory in economics. He said, no, Rashid, just think about it. If you rent a place and you are not taking good care of it, something goes bad and you don't report it or fix it, somebody is going to knock on your door. The owner will knock on your door. But if it is your own house, you can actually ignore this, right? So ownership automatically doesn't mean you do it. And I said, whoa, I thought about our own home, and there were a number of things actually that we haven't done, and it's our home, nobody is going to. So me and him actually did a paper, you know, so that is the kind of space I enjoy being here. And I like policy relevant research. I'm not impressed just publishing papers and leaving them in the journal. No, what's the point? I want my work to really be impactful, get to the ground, help people, support, improve sustainability, livelihoods. And so that has taken me to places that when my grandfather told me we're playing soccer, he said you should work as if it feels good. Places I never thought I would be, right? I mean, so over here, that's at the WTO. Our group, we have a big database of subsidies paid by every country of the coastal country of the world. And the WTO members use it in their negotiations. That's the data many people depend on. Even China says, that's the one we believe in. All the databases are wrong, but we believe in the Somalia one, you know? So that took me to that place, one of our reports. Pascal Lamy is in the middle. He was a director general, and he read our report page to page. I went to Geneva. He gave me an hour asking me questions. So that's it. Over here at the US Congress, what did we do? We publish a report where we say, if the US were to work hard and rebuild America's overfish stocks, how much more dollars will that generate? And when it came out, it got so interesting, I got asked to come and talk about it in Congress, right? That's at the UN. And here, you know this gentleman. When I knew him, he was just a prince, you know. Yeah, it was remarkable. One of the things he was saying here with the famous British tea thing, I said, Rashid, tell me, which countries are messing our oceans up the most? And I will invite them here for dinner. You know, so that's the kind of thing you get with the kind of work we do, really applied work that people take serious. So overall, I'm deeply interested in how economics, through integration with other disciplines, can be used to ensure that coastal and ocean resources are sustainably used and conserved for the benefit of both those of us here and those coming in the future. So that is what I actually spend time with. And Ben is in this room, which was a nice surprise. Ben did his master's with me, had good time in Fiji with helping the Fijian authorities to manage their fisheries well, with this kind of motivation behind what we do. So this is just to summarize. There are too many areas to talk about, but essentially that's us in the middle. And game theory, we apply game theory. My talk later will touch on that, some of the work. We do bioeconomic modeling, evaluation, the rebuilding, economics of rebuilding, all that. Discounting is one place I've spent time on, working with biologists actually, because they keep telling me, Rashid, why do you guys, why do you discount the future? Huh? Why do you do that? The fish should be more valuable, the ecosystem should, and you are discounting it. So they kind of push me to start thinking, and I will spend some time there. Marine pollution, subsidies I've mentioned, illegal fishing, and we build databases. We have the subsidies database, we have price database, cost of fishing database, and they're all global. So you will find every country in there, which means we get a lot of argument. We say, no, our data is not that. I say, okay, you have good data, better data, give it to me. We are not married to this data. We're always trying to improve. There was a day I said that to a South African, I don't have any data, and the whole room just bursts into laughter. How do you know his data is bad if you don't have any data, right? So we're very progressive in this. We're open to just let us get the best data, make it available to people, right? To those who can use it. So I think this is an example, and I don't have time. This is a Ocean Canada partnership. We just completed this project funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, 6-year project. We looked at the Pacific, Atlantic, and the Arctic in the face of climate change. And this was really, we had 22 partners, Canadian universities. We even have the Vancouver Ports Authority. We had a philosopher as well as ecologists and economists, right? We have everybody there, and we actually we published a book in April on this sea change, managing Canada's ocean, something like that. So I just gave it as an example because we don't have time. The subsidies work. In 2021, we published this paper. It was just a letter to science, but it was so powerful. I managed to get about 300 scientists around the world in all continents except Antarctica, to be part of this. And we published it. It was so influential. The Director General of the WTO, the DG, Ngozi, Madam Ngozi, she's Nigerian, and it was so big, she actually organized a hand-off of the letter to her, which she copied and sent to every WTO member country in the world. And actually, many people think this, from the scientists, this helped them to actually get the first agreement ever, because you bring so many scientists to push an idea, it usually can be influential. And the gentleman there he was a guy who led the negotiation, ambassador. He was from Colombia. And Anna Schumacher, that's my PhD student. She's now doing postdoc with us, So that is the kind of, again, an example of what we do. Now, the ocean, and we the people. What else? Let's get closer to the topic of the day. Everybody in this room knows this, right? 70% of the ocean, of the Earth's surface is ocean, right? Only 30%. So I tell people, I say, if you were scoring only 30% in all your exams, you would never be in this room, right? So we cannot mess up 70% of the world's surface, right? And be okay. So the ocean is really something we can play around. We cannot ignore. It's too light to ignore in a more positive way than the other too light to ignore, which was a big thing here in the US. Yeah. So that's one. But because it's so light doesn't mean that we can abuse it or misuse it or overfish it. That's one point to know. And also, because it's so light doesn't mean that we cannot do something to sustain it. People, we have the brains, we have the goodwill, the empathy, enough of us to really manage this properly so that I can continue to give us the benefit. In one of my recent books that I titled Infinity Fish, if we manage it well, it can continue to give us benefit forever, right? And so I say fish is more valuable than diamond. I tell economists, they chase me out of the room. What am I talking? But think about it. Fish, if you manage it well, can continue to give you benefit throughout time. And no matter how small that benefit, if you sum something to infinity, what is it? Mathematically, it's infinity, right? Yeah, but diamond is not forever. You dig a ton of diamond today, you can never go back and dig another ton. You will tell me I will invest it to make money, but most governments are running deficit, including this big one, the US one, right? So yeah, the ocean is really too big to ignore, but we can manage it. And if we don't manage it well, we can mess it up. And the ocean is crucial for our survival in so many ways. Oxygen, generating oxygen. But here, this is a picture from all over, right? This is West Africa. I think it's Senegal, that up there. That's in the morning. People go to the coast for their livelihood. All sorts of, the boats are coming, women come to buy, processing, feed their family. It's really a lifeline. I think that's Dakar in Senegal. Then you look at this place, I think that's in Sweden. That's how intertwined this place is with the ocean, right? And so on and so forth. The tunas, the big boats around Seattle, and I'm sure Bellingham too has. So just this alone shows us how valuable this is, and we need to take care of it. But are we taking care of it? That's the question. And the answer mostly is not so well. So you have on the top panel here, that's the symbol of the overfishing we are doing. Daniel Pauli, my colleague at UBC and co-winner of the Tyler Prize, he coined the notion of fishing down the marine food web. We take the big valuable things, and we take the next one, and we take the next one. Before you know, he says we may end up with mud. You know, it's pushing it to the end, right? And that's fishing down. And it's not only that we are taking the big ones and going down. You look at the habitat also. The habitat is also being misused, right? With time, on the x-axis, you see it was richer, all the bottom trawling and so on. Then we have climate change, the big one. Then the marine debris, oil spill. So there's a lot of pressure on our oceans around the world. And we really have to double up and try to protect this. And when I talk about protecting fish, why am I doing it? It's not just because I care about the fish, but I care about people. Ultimately, if the fish doesn't do well, many people will not do well. We take out of the ocean about 100 million tons of fish a year. That's what we pull out, the biomass. If you really want to understand how massive this is, if you convert this to the number of mature cows, and assume that one mature cow weighs 1 ton, which is not unreasonable, then we are pulling out 100 million mature cows, I call them fish cows, out of the ocean each year. Just imagine that, even the massive ocean, pulling out that amount of biomass, you know, it's not easy. And that translates into money, it's economics, it's jobs, it's exports, it's trade. Fish is the most traded agricultural commodity in the world. About 40% of fish caught are traded. You know what the percentage is for rice? 5%, just to give you an idea. So it is economic, and 260 million people actually draw some income out of fish around the world. So it's crucial. And when there's no fish, that's what you get. Is that all the shrimp I get? And that lady, that's a symbol of environmental refugees that's increasing around the world. If your village is not livable, what do people do? Do they sit down and die? No. Even the fish are following cold water. People move. And so we have a lot of forced migration. Europeans and West Africans, it's a big issue for everybody. So take care of the fish, and it will take care of many people, and we will all benefit from that because there will be less trouble in the world. All right, so climate change. The first point I want to make here is that we have one global ocean, actually. So it's good to think about the ocean that way. It connects all of us. And so it's about international relations, it's about trade. This has motivated John Kerry, actually, to start something called our Ocean Conference when he was Secretary of State. He said, look, fish and the ocean is not just an environmental issue, it is also a foreign secretary issue. So each year now, since he started, the world meets in one place. The last time, just April, I think, they met in Greece, in Athens, actually. And it goes from country to country where foreign ministers come together to try to see how best to manage the global ocean and the fish we take, because it's all connected. We put lines. The light blue is what we call country waters, exclusive economic zones of countries. So if you're on the Pacific coast of the US, you see that, the light blue. They are connected. Canada, Mexico, US, our fish, they go where they go, right? They don't need visa. No, they go. Sometimes I want to be fished. You know, many of you here don't understand this. When I'm in the developing world, Latin America or Africa, I say this, they get it. The whole room just booms because they know what it means to look for visa, right? To go to some parts of the world. So that's the light part. And the deep blue is the high seas. So you have lines there, but the fish don't notice. And essentially what you do in one part of the ocean can affect other parts. And this is where Canada and the US management of fish comes from, but it's all over the world. You know, in Norway, you have Russia and Norway managing the cod stocks. You go to Southern Africa, Namibia, Angola, and South Africa have to manage. They share the waters there, and so on and so forth. So transboundary management is a big thing. And a few of us in economics actually spend time doing that. This is the average temperature currently above, that is above the long-term average. So the more reddish it is, the more further away you are from the long-term average, and you can see, and this is an earlier figure. So these are the issues we are dealing with climate change. It's getting warmer, and the science tells us that fish that can move with cold water. So actually, the North Antarctica and Arctic are supposed to get more fish just based on this alone, because fish are moving, right? Then you have sea level, less sea ice. So the Arctic, where the fish are going, there are changes too, right? In fact, ocean acidification, the Arctic is one of the hotspots. So there you go. These things happen in different ways in different places, but together it's quite scary. Because just imagine fish leaving the equator, trying to get to the north, and then they get to the Arctic and they meet acidic water, right? From frying pan to acidic water, you know, it doesn't sound good. So that's the thing we are struggling with, how to really push back on this climate change business so that we can have a more healthy ocean. And this figure simply says that if you are changing the physics and chemistry of the ocean, of anything, you are going to affect life in that thing. You know, if you come into this room and change the chemistry by pumping out all the oxygen, and it's gonna be wild, right? So when you do that, and that's what climate change is doing, that's going to affect the organisms in there. It's going to affect the populations of different animals in the ocean, and that leads to impacts on community structure, which ultimately impacts fisheries and the people. So that's what this is saying. So you have one arrow going this way. That's the impact of climate change. And recently, many of us are saying, how about the other arrow? What we're doing in fishing, how is it also impacting climate change? Because if you are fishing with 2 times the fishing effort you really need, you are pumping too much carbon out unnecessarily. And that goes to aggravate climate change, which then hits you back, right? So there's a lot of work that is ongoing on that. Now, as economists, many in this room are economists, you say, so what happens when you see that physics, the chemistry are changing, they're affecting life in the ocean? Then naturally, they are going to affect the catches you take, right? Because fish are shrinking or they are moving, how much you can catch will change. That will affect the food security of people who depend on fish. But not only them, even I say fish is the one thing that both the rich and the poor actually benefit from a lot. So if you're in this city or in Vancouver, you have a wonderful something to celebrate. Many of us will go to the restaurant and order seafood, right? If we are from West Africa, coastal West Africa or Southeast Asia, fish may be the only animal protein you can get into your meal. So it's good for everybody and food security. And if the catches are affected, how much money you make, the catch value, the landed value will be affected. The cost of fishing will be affected. You may have to go far, which will cost you. Or if you're lucky, the fish may come to you and it's just cheaper to catch. These things can go all ways, right? And therefore affect the profits that our companies can make, the incomes that fishers can take, and also the distribution of benefits, something I'll touch on when I talk about Canada and Norway. So that's basically you move from the science, from the physics to the ecology, to the biology, then to the people and the economics and all the things we do. So that's a quick connection with climate change, ecology, and economics. Now, how do we do the modeling? I generally, because I'm interdisciplinary, I avoid putting equations in my slides a lot. I hope I'm not disappointing some of you. But this is the way we represent. And these are equations, actually, yeah. So the method we apply is simply something like this with variations. So you have global climate change projections, like the IPCC ones, RCP, that, right? So we grab them. And again, this work is interdisciplinary. I don't know much about that. My colleagues do, so they do that. Then, based on that, you make predictions about the impact on fish species, how they distribute, the quantity, the size, what happens. And then you feed that into your species composition if you are looking at a particular country's exclusive economic zone, which will then give you the potential catch you can take of the species. Then your gear composition will also likely change, right? If you were catching salmon and suddenly what do you have? You have sardines, then you may have to gear up or modify your gear, right? So, and that happened in Vancouver. There was a time it was so warm, fish moved from the US and Mexico, sardines, and suddenly we have so much sardines in the coast, and the fishing sector didn't know how to even deal with it, right? There's no market, so that, and then that feeds into your cost side and your prices, you know, if you have price functions, and all that will then impact on the economic rent or profits you make. So this is just a schematic of all the equations I would have shown better. All right, so once you have this kind of models like we do in our interdisciplinary group, my group, the Fisheries Economic Research Unit, we deal with more of the economic side, and my colleagues deal with the more ecology and climate side. And then we apply them. So this is an example of what you can get out of this kind of modeling. So we have two scenarios, RCP 2.6 and RCP 8.5. 2.6 is mild climate change, you know, but 8.5 is when we go up to about 3.5 degrees above the average. So then we run the models and say, what will happen to the potential catch you get? What will happen to the revenue and the cost? And so this is just one representation. So the more reddish it is, that means the more you lose the catch potential. If it is blue, that means you're catching, and then red, and then the yellow is kind of so-so, right? So no clear increase or decrease. And so this is the kind of things we produce from our models, just to give you as an example. All right, so let's narrow in now to Canada and the US. So if the fish are moving, in the first place, many fish stocks are shared. One of our papers says at least 55% of the global catch we take are catches of species that are shared between countries or country and high seas, you know. So that's what we're trying. So you have two coastal countries, maybe Canada and the US there, right? That's the coast. You have your country waters and you have the high seas. And we call you a straddling, transboundary fish stock if you go between two country waters, like halibut does. Not much of it, as far as I know, goes into the high seas. So it's really transboundary between Canada and the US. And then you have straddling fish stocks that go from country waters into the high seas. And then you have discrete high sea stocks, those who are, they are in the high seas. Some of us call them the orphans of the ocean because they don't have any government behind them, right? There's like no property rights, you know, so they are orphans of the ocean. And so you have this ABC are things that we talk about shared stocks in economic analysis, yeah. So here we are. So you have this picture trying to explain what we are doing. Our study area, this is a paper we published in 2020, and it's getting a lot of interest because I gave a talk last month to the US Senate Budget Committee. They were working on climate change in the ocean and fisheries impacts. And so I talked about this paper again there. And here you have, so you have the coast, you have the West Coast, and if you see I have a key there, you have Canada is a bit what? Grayish, that you can tell. And the US is a darker gray and then you have the red IPHC is the International Pacific Halibut Commission, which is a management system put together by Canada and the US to manage, because this is a shared stock. And they go from what? The US through Canada into Alaska. So you have that on that side of the map. And then on the East Coast, we have the Gulf of Maine, and that's what you see on there. And I'm going to talk now about halibut. I'll also talk about cod, and I'll talk about the yellowtail fish. So those are the three I'll talk about. But they are in these different regions. They are shared by the two countries, and they are managed by Canada and the US, because both countries realize that if you don't do that, if we just go everybody for himself or herself, right? What happens? We'll end up in a prisoner's dilemma where we empty the ocean. So joint cooperative management. Many countries do that around the world, and the US and Canada does. Okay, so that's that. And what am I trying to do here? Number one, we're trying to calculate the impact of climate change on the economic benefits, which here is profit, that Canadian companies and American fishing companies make on these species. So the first thing I did here is to show you basic data before we started our modeling, the parameters here. So you have Atlantic cod, you have Canada, US, and the average catch, right? That's what you see there in million tons. Then you have the cost of fishing, which we calculated. And then you have the revenue, and of course, then you can know what the profit is. So this is the starting point of our analysis. At the time we did the baseline, that these are the profits and the costs and so on. So then the question is, what happens under different scenarios of climate change? So that's what I'll try to show here. And to do that, this is a simple figure of actually the Pareto optimal curve, right? Pareto optimality. So essentially you have the US and you have Canada. And that's the Pareto frontier in terms of what profit they take home, depending on where they are in these dynamics. So the big pie, the pie in the middle here, now you've seen this, can I do that? Can you see it? Yeah, so this one here, I'm assuming that is the equilibrium without climate change, WC. So let's say our fisheries here, you could choose at a point, or maybe even on the curve, but I don't think we're on the optimal curve. No, we're somewhere in there. So I just chose this. And then you can see what it means, each country, what you get with and without climate change. And that is, did I say there's no equation in the presentation? This is not an equation, this is easy, right? Yeah, so here, that's where we are before we get hit by climate impacts. And that then shifts it shifts the equilibrium to this point, just because fish are moving or they're getting smaller also. So there is a shift. And when we were here, each country takes home something. That's the small pies in here. So the US will take something here with climate change and without climate change, and Canada too. All right. So, and that point is called the threat point, because this is, I'm assuming, this is the non-cooperative equilibrium, right? Everybody does their own, you end up there. That's why they are not on the optimal point, right? Because there's a waste, they are not cooperating. And that will be your threat point. Essentially, it's what you take home, whether you cooperate or not. And no party will participate in managing this together if they don't get at least their threat point. Because why would you do that? There's no benefit. So that's why the trade point is important. And climate change shifts this. Because where does this come from? How come the US get this benefit at this point and Canada gets that? What is the underlying thing? Is the ecology, is the economics, the price they get, the cost of fishing? That's what gives you your payoff, right? So, and climate change messes around with this because it messes around with the ecology amount of fish. And this is real. The salmon treaty between Canada and the US, I think, has collapsed at least 2 times because of this kind of shifts. You do it thinking that's the proportion of fish that spends time in Canada and the US, and climate change changes that. And one country will say, it's no more fair, right? So then the thing collapses and they have to recalculate. So that is the thing. And if these trade points are shifting, it makes management unstable, right? And then that can. So what we did was to say, starting with those profits, if you have climate change, 2 scenarios, how will the profits, the trade points of Canada and the US change? Essentially, that is what we calculate. And how will the profitability of the fishery be? And I'm going to show you a few slides now on that. The paper is published 2020 in Ecology and Society, an interdisciplinary journal. Aha, that's one thing. A lot of my papers go into interdisciplinary journal. I do publish in economic ones, but so that I won't be disowned, you know. yeah. So, but yeah. So that is that, and that's the basis of the model I'm going to talk about here, and what comes next. So some of the results here. You already have the initial profits in mind, right? So here I'm just giving you relative stuff. And when you look here, you have high emission and low emission. We did 2 scenarios. RCP 2.6 is it's a low emission scenario. RCP 8.5 is a high one. So we ran our models with that global assumptions in there to see what happens to the ecology and therefore the economics. And what you see is that, and on the y-axis are absolute profits, the starting point, what will happen to it. So the first points you see close to the y-axis is the table I showed you before. And then with time, with climate change, that's what the changes will be. And what you see is that in all cases, the absolute profit of everybody goes down. Under the scenarios, it goes more down when it's mild than when it is high. So that is the first point here. And depending present day, mid-century, and end of century, what happens? You will see 2 pairs, solid lines and then non-solid lines. The non-solid lines are the non-discounted profits. So you have discounted profits, which is what you will see in economic papers and journals with discounted things, because $1 today is more valuable than $1 tomorrow. But if you're doing interdisciplinary work, people will say, show us also what the nominal values are, right? So we put it in there. So that's the first message. Our modeling shows that for the different species, and you have on top here, you have Atlantic cod. In the middle, you have what is in the middle? Pacific halibut, and at the bottom you have yellowtail flounder, and they all go down. So climate change is going to affect the biomass and affect the catch, and therefore the profitability. Point number 1. Then we go on and say, what happens to the relative profitability of the 2 countries? We know that each country will get less, but what happens with the distribution of the benefit? And when I was at the Senate, this was the thing that caught their attention, actually. Oh my God. For the 2 of the species, US will end up being disadvantaged. Whilst for halibut, it was a wash. There was no big difference, as you see. So on top here, you have the proportion of total profit that goes to the US versus Canada. And the solid lines, that's the US. The more light ones is Canada. So if you take Pacific halibut, that's what this is. No, Atlantic cod, actually. If you look at the beginning distribution, the US takes 84% of the total profit that is made on that stock without climate change before our model started. Canada takes the remaining. But with climate change, that's what you get. By the end of the century, 52% of the profit will be grabbed by Canada and 48% by the US because of the changes. Why is that? The cod are moving a bit more northwards. So they're going to be more in Canadian waters than in US waters. And that's what you see here. And that's high emission on top. And the low emission is usually milder, but the directions are the same. So you have a drop to only 73. So just looking at this alone, US should really work hard to stop climate change, right? Because if it is mild, US will keep most of its current advantage. But if it is not, it turns around actually by the end of the century. So that is for Atlantic cod. Now, what do we get for halibut? Yeah, halibut is, like I said, it's virtually no big change. The US takes 82, Canada has 18, and at the end of it is 1783 with the high emission. The low emission is also almost nothing. So why do you think this? What could explain this? I've been thinking about that. Can anybody? Yeah, so please go ahead. Aha, she knows the answer. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, because as you saw in the map, right? They're moving up, so they go past Canada and go to Alaska, and that's US again. I think that helps to neutralize. Yeah, beautiful. There are some species that also like climate. They like the heat, so they do. When we did only for BC, we saw, was it some species of crabs? They're actually happy to be in the hotter water, so we saw more of them, right? But in the case of halibut, I think it's exactly that. Yeah, yeah, great. So then the last one is yellowtail flounder, and here too you see, Canada really moves again. It's 63% to 37, and then by the end of the century will be 54-46. In the paper, we did sensitivity analysis, so you can see how robust these things are. But for this talk, I just talk about these results. All right. So relatively, Canada will do better with higher climate than the US. But the question is, for how long? You know, and my Norwegian friends tell me, oh, Rashid, we will be fine with warmer weather, which is true. It's so cold. So and then I tell them, for how long, right? Because it's not like climate change will push the fish to Canada and then stop there, right? Where next, right? So we all have interest in stopping this, frankly speaking, yeah. Because the end outcome doesn't seem like it will look good for anybody. All right. So now the conclusion, getting to the end, and I think the time is also looking. So here, not addressing climate change will lead to economic consequences. So in my Senate intervention, though that's actually conclusions I took from that intervention, I had just 5 minutes to say a lot, right? So for all fisheries, we see that future profits will decline. That's one, that in the first panel of things I showed you. And then when you go species by species, in the case of Atlantic cod, Canada actually will benefit with Atlantic cod relatively. And then when you go to the next ones, yellowtail the same, Canada will, let's see. Yeah, but for yellowtail, that was also interesting. Initially, before the mid-century, US actually gains, and that needs to be explained, right? But as time goes on and the intensity increases, it flips over to Canada's advantage. And the halibut, we have already talked a lot about that. Yeah, so the relative profitability of the two countries fishing is likely to remain stable. And what do you think about that? You give us the answer. The senator and the professor. Huh? Yes, I had half an hour with the state senator, and I was very impressed to see somebody combining academia with politics. It's nice. I like breaking silos, and that's what you're doing, which is magic, actually. I will encourage some of my people to do that, okay? Yeah. All right, so thank you so much for your attention and time for the questions. Back to you.
Right, again, we're gonna have this. Yeah, so we have this extra mic. This won't get picked up for the webinar though, so I'll have Rashid, if you ask a question, I'll have him repeat the question and then go with an answer. So anybody wanna start? I'll come your way.
How does fish raised on fish farms, like in other similar countries, how would that factor into this whole stuff?
Yeah, thank you. Oh. So the question is, how does fish farms or fish farming, aquaculture, how does it feature in this? And I like the question because I didn't talk about it at all, which is crazy actually, because my focus is on wild fish, but you cannot do that these days because fish farming has been growing quite a bit. I mean, 8%, 6% now globally, right? So you cannot ignore it. And how does it factor here? There are a number of ways. Number one, quite a bit of the fish we raise in farms are carnivores. They need to have fish meal and oil to be fish. So salmon is one of them. You got to feed them with sardines and anchovies, right? So even if climate change doesn't impact aquaculture directly, it will do it indirectly through the what feeds them, right? So that's one channel, and this is a whole debate. I mean, ecologists don't like farming carnivorous fish because they say they don't generate extra food, because you need more than 1 ton of anchovies and sardines and other similar things in order to create one ton of salmon. In the case of tuna, it's 10 times, right? So they think it's crazy. Why do you do this, right? Tuna is not efficient. Feed the people with the fish right away, right? So that's one channel. The second thing is that it actually, climate change does impact them directly. In ocean acidification, here in this place, in Washington, was it what? There's some farmers here. What do they farm? Who knows? Oysters. They were so impacted by ocean acidification years ago, and it was a big political thing, right? Because that so they can impact directly and indirectly in that way. You know, I'm a bit so worried about how optimistic people are about agriculture is gonna. You know, I gave a talk about sustainability, and one guy came to me and said, "Why do you care about sustaining wild fish?" And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "You know, we can farm all the fish the world needs in one high-rise building in Holland." He told me, so, wow, that high-rise building must be really high, right? And is it going to provide all the inputs you need? The feed, the fertilizer? And is it going to just swallow up the waste you generate? So this made me, we published a paper 2022. The title is Agriculture Over Optimism. I was forced to put a question mark by reviewers. So they made it agriculture over optimism, but it's really over optimism. So we need it. It can contribute, but it has to be done carefully, like everything. Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. Love it. Questions are the best because then you can. Yeah.
I was wondering why you chose to look at cod and halibut particularly. Could you do something for salmon? Because that seems like a pretty important fish too.
Yeah. You know, we could have chosen a number of shared stocks, salmon, for example. Yeah. But we chose these two because these three because they are really important also, right? and they have management systems in place. You have the International Halibut Commission. Salmon also has the Salmon Commission. So that is one reason. But I think it's purely the importance to the economy, to the communities, indigenous people. So that's really, we could have chosen anything that's shared and important to the two countries. Yeah, great.
I'm going to jump in with one of the questions here from the webinar. And then I have one in my pocket from the pre-questions from the registrations that both have to do with salmon. So it's a nice link up. So from the webinar, was the prediction for Pacific salmon species, especially Chinook, sockeye, and coho in response to climate change? And then the one that, the question that someone had asked earlier that perhaps you could address had to do with the impact of dams.
Dams, yeah, okay. So the first question is impact of climate change on salmon, especially sockeye and all the other species. Fortunately, we did a study years ago, you know, Van City, those who know Vancouver, it's a local bank, right? So they came to me, we were talking, and they said, you know, we want our customers to take climate change seriously. Many of them don't really get it. So how do we do that? So we did back and forth. And at the end, we agreed for our group to model and estimate how much more households in Vancouver and BC, I think we went province one, how much more will they have to spend on the different scenarios of climate change if they insist on eating the same quantity and quality of salmon under climate change? And we did this to millions of dollars. My God, the day we published that report, I was in the news from about 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. It was unbelievable. I'm in taxi to go from one media house to the other, and I get a call. Somebody asks, you mean we are going to pay that much? I say, yeah, under our estimate, because if the fish goes down, and not only BC fish, because we import a lot, shrimps, for example, from Asia, and they're going to be affected. So that will affect your price if you insist on eating the same time. And that got a lot of attention. And one of the species that we saw big impact on was sockeye salmon, actually. It is going to drop. That's the study I alluded to earlier about crabs. Crabs were looking happy, but all the others were not. And salmon species were not happy at all. Yes, thank you.
I just want to reinforce your price comment that my wife wanted me to cook halibut for her birthday dinner. So
Yeah.
I bought a lovely piece from Hagen's.
Yeah.
$30 a pound.
Yes.
It's a great piece of halibut, but
It's expensive.
that's a serious price.
Yeah.
Anyway, I actually wanted to ask you, thank you for your work with the World Trade Organization. I follow trade issues very closely, and the fisheries subsidies negotiations have been very important. How would you assess the progress to date? Has it gone as far as you hoped it might when you got involved in this issue? Or are you disappointed at the outcomes today? Maybe you can kind of assess for us
That's
how
wonderful.
much progress has been made in reducing subsidies, and thereby, I mean, the hope at the end of the day is to reduce the impact of the fisheries.
In the fisheries, yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. Subsidies, you know, I remember my first paper on subsidies was in 2002, actually, almost right after the WTO got the mandate to actually deal with this. We started building our database. So, and I've been following this. I've seen 4 director generals, you know, and I'm disappointed, you know, because it's over 20 years. And we got the first agreement only in 2022, June 2022, and it's a very weak agreement. I mean, you know, the agreement has 3 components. Number 1, no subsidies to stocks that are already overfished. Think about that. That is key, or that's not prevention. We don't want the stock to be overfished before you stop giving them subsidies. Stop it. Don't let them go down before you start doing something. Then the other one is illegal fishing. No subsidies. That is great. That's fine, provided you can know who is the illegal fishing boat and so on. So that's useful. And then they said that no subsidies to boats that fish in the high seas where there is no any management at the moment, right? So it looks good on paper, but what we actually publish a paper on that one in particular. We look at the area of the high seas, the deep blue. There are RFMOs all over, regional fisheries management organization, but they are managing only things like tuna because that's what they're interested in, not the species, the demersals and the long-living ones, right? And if you use the fact that they are all over the place, only 3.5% of the high seas is not covered by an RFMO, which means that is the only place, right? So that's that. And we had, the WTO had a meeting in February in Abu Dhabi. I was there, hoping they were going to strengthen that agreement because they themselves said that was just what they could get through. And I understand them, it's tough. It's really difficult. I actually praise the Director General and the ambassador for even getting an agreement. The world is tough, you know. Think about it, even locally in Canada and the US. If I said this before, maybe I can say it here too. Should I? Should I say that? I say in this beautiful country, Americans cannot agree whether January 6th is a picnic or not. yeah. So, and then you want me to blame the WTO? They've done well, you know. So I'm kind of reasonable in my criticism, right? But the first tweet I actually wrote after that meeting, which I attended, was that I'm beginning to think that maybe the WTO is not the place to do this because we've been disappointed for too much. And it was India this time. India blocked everything. You know what they're asking for? 25 years grace period for developing countries. Whatever we do, give us 25 years, a quarter of a century. The fish should all be gone, you know. So yeah. So I think they are now working to see whether they can get India to move a bit. Hopefully, a new country will not appear. You know, sometimes they do it like a rolling thing. One blocks it, you deal with that, and another appears, right? I hope I'm being cynical here, but I hope.
My students about the perils of consensus decision making.
Oh my God! Oh, you get
perfect case study.
Oh yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for the question. Yeah, the questions. Yeah, yeah, consensus. Yeah. Ooh.
What are the justifications for why they get subsidies, and what are sometimes the form of the subsidy? What are the forms of these subsidies?
Yeah. Okay. Why do you give subsidies? I mean, there are all sorts of reasons actually. Some of them good ones. You know. Yeah. There are social reasons. You know. The challenge I gave a talk to G20 countries and the British House of Commons, and the Speaker of the House of Indonesia went after me like crazy. Said, no, Rashid, we'll continue to give subsidies. I said, why, sir? Why will you do that? Said, we want to help the poor. We want to, and at the time, I knew the money doesn't go to the poor, but I didn't have data. So the lady I showed, Anna Schobauer, when she joined me, we studied that. We took the whole world and how much goes to large scale, small scale. You know how much? Only 20% goes to small scale, 80% to the big thing. So he probably gives it to friends and so on. So there is that. We want to help the poor. And how can you argue about that, really? So that's social reasons. Norway, for example, years ago, they've reduced a lot, but years ago, they give lots of subsidies to coastal fishing communities up in the north. Why? Because of the Soviet Union. They don't want the place to be empty. So the 1/9 Soviet Union or Russia will come and take it. So you want to keep the people there. So there are all sorts of reasons. The thing is, some of them really are bad for the environment, like fuel subsidies. You know, if somebody is paying 30% of your fuel costs, you are going to fish more, right? It's basic economics, artificial profit. So that is where, so we try to classify good and bad subsidies, beneficial and capacity enhancing. And we try to help people to avoid the terrible ones. Me and my other postdoc, we published a paper earlier this year where what we did, we took the 30 least developed coastal countries in the world, and we calculated how much harmful subsidies their fisheries get, not only from their government, but international help also. And we calculated the poverty gap between fishers and what they need to meet the poverty line. And we said, How much of this will the harmful subsidies cover if they just repurpose this and give them their income? I tell you, for 11 of those countries, it will cover everything. And for the 30 together, 80% of their gap between the poverty line and where fishers are. And they're poor because there are too many going for the same fish. The fish is too small to carry everybody on their back, you know. How do you get that movement? So, yeah. Lots of work for you, Senator.
Thank you so much. I have a question about other policies. So if we can go back to the examples of kind of the US, Canada, kind of distribution under climate change.
Yeah.
When you present this to policymakers, I expect the next thing that they ask is, well, what do we do?
Yeah.
Right. And so what are besides policies that kind of are generally and overall addressing climate change to try to mitigate, get us to at least the low emission scenario, right? What are the other types of policies that you have explored to
help?
Or I'm also just thinking about the transitions that fisheries will have to go through for this. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, lots of things that could be said here. Yeah. Number one, in terms of directly on the policy. Okay, you say this is going to happen. What do we do? People have written about this, not just me. I think Kathleen Miller from one of the universities in the desert, it's Nevada, she's written about this, Gordon Monroe and others. The key thing is to have agreements that are flexible and adaptable, that the parties know that this is going to happen and you make room for adjustment as the climate changes. Otherwise, if you're too fixed, it's like a bridge that doesn't have any room for expansion, right? So flexibility, adaptability, and understanding between the parties could help. Now, more general policy, when I think of the poor fishers in particular, I think we have to find a way to help people to have their livelihood without depending on fish. There's just too many fishes for the fish to carry on their backs. So I have a crazy idea. It just got accepted, so it will appear, where I'm actually asking for basic income. Give every human being basic income for their livelihood. I said this at the WTO, and they're looking. I said, I know why you are thinking. You want to say, where will you get the money? I know you are hiding the money. I made a joke. I don't know where the money, but you guys know we can do it. So because there's so much pressure on people, and it's really hard to tell people to pull back. They tell me, Rashid, you're talking about 5 years. I'll be dead by then. What can I say? I don't want nobody to starve, right? So we need to look outside of the fishery to really find ways to help people to find a way to have living that is less dependent on fish and nature. And that needs a lot of thinking. But I just got a paper accepted, so it's going to be quite noisy, I'm sure, causing trouble a little bit. As a scientist, you have to do that, right? Isn't it? As an economist too, right? When I say scientists, we're all scientists here. Wonderful. Yes, sir.
Can you speak to the case for subsidies for decarbonizing fisheries?
Yes. So, subsidies, and this is good. It actually jives with your question in a way. Yeah. What is the basis of subsidies in economics? I think economists in this room know that, right? It's about externalities, actually. Essentially, if you have somebody generating positive externalities, then in our collective view, it's good to support that person to do more of it because it's good. It brings more social benefit to all, right? That's why at UBC, we have student U-Pass, we call it student pass for transit. One of our presidents, Martha Piper, she came in and said, look, every morning tons of people drive to campus and drive away. What measures can we take to reduce this? Because you're pumping out so much. So they came up with a subsidized bus pass for students. So it will be good for them to forget their car and take the bus and come. And it had an effect, right? staff members, they came up with policies to turn the thing into a university city. That's how I moved away from Richmond to campus now. So I don't have a car. I walk to the office. It's beautiful. Well, I couldn't drive here, right? So I had to take the train and I was delayed by 1 hour. That's okay. So it's beautiful. So positive externalities, you support. Negative externalities, you tax them, actually. So if the idea is to help us, if we all agree, carbon is the cause of this, you want people to move away. So then you can support energy transition subsidies, right? Within limits, actually. Yeah, so that's where that comes from, I think. Anyone who has another view, why do we subsidize? Why will an economist support subsidy at all? To me, this is the basic thing, right? So when you add value without charging for it, that means everything being equal, you are going to produce less of it. So we encourage you to get to the social optimal level, right? Yeah. So, but it can be abused, right? Yeah. Oh, it will be. Yeah. Not just it can, but it will be. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question
Yes.
along lines. What is along you noted that with the warming of the Gulf of Maine, there's an increased border dispute as Maine loses its lobster industry to Canada. I'm just hoping you could comment on.
So what is the question again? So Maine is losing lobster to Canada,
Yeah.
and what is then the question?
Just if you could comment on it, what you know about that.
Yeah. So there's this movement happening, and that's one of them, right? So then a classic one was actually, what was it? Not sardines, mackerel. Mackerel was moving away from British waters into Icelandic waters. And it was very controversial. The British were very pissed off, right? And the Icelandics are laughing to the bank, right? You know, I was in a meeting where two of them, the former Icelandic Prime Minister and Charles Clover, if you know the name, is a journalist into ocean and fisheries a lot. He actually headlined the End of the Line movie, you know, and the two of them went after each other. Charles says, "Come on, what are you guys doing? This is our fish." The British is our fish. And the Icelandic Prime Minister had a big laugh. He said, you are crazy. These are now our fish, right? And so that's the kind of thing that will lead to, right? Because it's not like people can just follow their lobster to the new jurisdiction. No. So conflicts are predicted to increase more because of this movement around the world if we don't watch it.
They're also wondering if it would have an impact on the restaurant industry.
Oh yeah. Because the impacts will be on both sides actually. So Maine is used to lobster. They have the system, the fishing, the market is there, added value restaurants. That's what one of their main. And suddenly they've moved to a place where this is not there. So they will also have to restructure economic costs and so on. Whilst these people, all their system will suffer, they will have to redo something. So very costly economically, actually, always, yeah. Can we stop the march of climate change? Yeah.
Thanks for treating us. It's good to see you and
Yeah.
I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about intergenerational discounting.
Oh. Yeah. My God, you know, so there's just so much to say, right, in the 1 hour. Yeah, intergenerational discounting. You know, I mentioned that I dabble into discounting. And Ben was there when I was pushing this, right? And the whole idea is, as economists, $1 to you today, everybody really, not economists, $1 to you today is more valuable for all sorts of reasons, right? You can use it now, you can invest it. Hey, you may not be here in 10 years, so you better grab it, right? So there are all sorts of good reasons why we discount. But ecologists just find it a bit twisted. I had an argument with Sylvie Gunnett. You remember Sylvie? She said, Rashid, what is this thing you economists are doing? What is discounting? I say, you know what? Do you have $5,000 to can you give it to me? I will use it. And 5 years, I'll give you back your $5,000. She said, you think I'm a fool? She said, that is discounted, right? Yeah. So she got it right away. But then in terms of ecology, people struggle with that because if climate change is anything that is so long-term, discounting takes it down. And so you do your cost-benefit analysis, you end up saying, hey, it's not worth it. And this is a struggle for many people. So what I tried to do with intergenerational discounting, it actually came from game theoretic thinking. So I just said, imagine you have 2 generations, you and your granddaughter or grandson, right? You are here and you do your fishing, you want the fish to eat. If I ask you, how should you arrange the catching of fish? You know, if you're here now and you don't care, no altruism about the future, you say, hey, let me take the fish once I'm alive and I'll enjoy it and go. Then you ask your granddaughter, she says, hey guys, I'm not here yet. Leave all the fish until I come, right? So you have these counter currents, right? And so what I said is maybe the thing is the way we do discounting, we use the discounting clock of current generations when we do our thing, right? We say T equals to 0. You integrate or you sum things. So it's always we who are the reference point. And I say, maybe we should have more discounting clocks for each generation. So I discount my fish because, yeah, I'm here. I won't be here 50 years, so who cares, right? But then some people will be here. So they don't discount their fish until they appear. So this thinking, we use it to introduce more dynamically. Every time new generation come, they discount as we all do. But please don't discount your grandsons or granddaughters' fish as if it is yours. Because the value of that to you, when they are here, will be nothing, right? So somebody mentioned Derek. Who was I talking? You mentioned Derek. Was it you? Yeah, Derek. In Norway, I went and gave a talk, and Derek Clark was the head of the department, and he said, oh, Rashid, this, don't temper, don't play around with the discount rate. So I said, Derek, just think about this. If your mom and dad had decided to send you to school based on the income you are earning today, discounted value of that, I don't think they will send you to school because it will show in their discounting calculations to be so small. And then he said, oh my God, and that would have made me a very sad person. That's how I got him to see a bit of reason in that, right? So that's the discounting clock idea, and it's really grown. People like it a lot, and I'm going to give the keynote for the European Association of Environmental and Resource Economists. And you know what title it is? I'm playing with the title now. The title is Bringing Indigenous and Granny Wisdom into Economics. So it's gonna rock the place, right? The title alone. And I'm thinking of this because the indigenous people actually talk about the 7th generation in their thinking. We manage for the 7th generation, not just us. So, and my grandfather says we should walk on earth as if it feels pain. If you bring those wisdoms into economics, we might be able to get where we haven't been able to do, just thinking about maximizing profit. Yeah, please.
I wanted to ask, what is it like at the WTO summits, and why is it so hard to come to agreements?
Yeah, you know, the thing is countries are always playing games. I think that's why you referred to, right? And a lot of the things blocking it is not about the subsidies. They come with their issues there and they are trading. So it's like, if fish is not that important to me, but I won't sign until you give me something on cotton or forestry, right? And then you have historical things coming into play. The African countries will say, what are you talking? You subsidize your fisheries to hell to get them where they are, and you are stopping us. So there are lots of things that come into play here. And I don't know how they even managed to get an agreement. Any agreement was impressive in that sense, right? So, yeah. Are you okay? You're a future generation, aren't you? Yeah. I don't want that. Good. Yeah.
Any further questions? Jason, I was on my way around there. Is there anything? No?
Yeah. So, yes, please, yeah.
Do you have any idea of how the temperature changing northward would affect Alaskan pollock populations?
Alaskan pollock. I haven't looked at that specifically, actually, so I may not be able to tell you. But it used to be one of the most healthy fish stocks around the world and in North America. But recently, I understand that it's being shaken. The biomass is a bit shaky, Could be climate change, but I don't have really a study to be able to tell you more firmly. Yeah. And pollock, one of the things they do, right? They catch them, send them to China. China processes them and sells it back to America in sticks. So if you calculate the carbon in and out, my God, this is bad economics. Yeah. Socially, I mean, socially.
You have time for maybe one more question here?
Yeah.
With Canada entering the Trans-Pacific Partnership, has these free trade agreements increased demand for Canadian fish, and has that increased overfishing in Pacific and Atlantic Oceans?
Can you repeat that? Yeah.
Yeah, with Canada being in the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Oh, yeah.
Entering all these free trade agreements with all these specific countries, has that increased demand in Canadian fish and then increased overfishing in Canadian waters?
Actually, unfortunately, I can't answer that. I haven't studied or read a paper about that. Yeah, I wish I could, right? But that trade agreement actually has a subsidies clause in it. Yeah, they have. And so I'm trying to encourage the world to look at that, right? And they have poorer countries in there, and they have mechanism to support them in terms of stock assessment, so they will know the condition of their stock in order to meet what the agreement says. So yeah. All right. Thank you.
All right, well, join me in thanking Rashid.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all for
Wonderful.
coming.
Yeah.
On behalf of the Department of Economics, I got my whole list, College of Business and Economics here at Western, along with Canadian American Studies, the Border Policy Research Institute, and Marine and Coastal Sciences Program. We really appreciate you taking the time, and there's still some snacks over there if you want to help yourself on the way out. And have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.